When you picture the Himalayas, what comes to mind? Probably those impossibly tall, serene peaks.
Definitely. They look so solid.
Exactly. Like the ultimate symbol of unchanging Earth, just standing there, quiet and still.
Yeah, they absolutely project that image. Majesty, permanence, um, total stability.
But our deep dive into what's really happening underneath, well, it paints a totally different picture, doesn't it?
It really does. Beneath that famous facade, the reality is anything but still. It's
I
constantly active.
Okay, let's get into this. We've been exploring the hidden life of the Himalayas, this region that looks calm, but is actually, well, humming with geological energy.
Mm-hmm.
Our mission here is to try and understand this constant hidden turbulence.
Yeah.
Why it's happening, what it tells us about our dynamic planet, and what it means for the millions of people living nearby.
Right. And we've pulled together some really fascinating insights looking at activity over quite a long period.
Nearly 3 decades worth of data.
Yeah, and one of the most surprising things, I think, right off the bat is just the sheer frequency of seismic events. It's not just about the potential for the big one, it's this constant, almost daily movement.
And the numbers are, well, they're kind of staggering when you lay them out.
They really are.
Based on observations from, was it 1991 to 2018?
That's the window, yeah. Almost 30 years.
We learned that the northern Himalayan region, places like Uttarakhand in India, parts of western Nepal experiences, on average, about 200 earthquakes every
Yeah.
single year.
200 a year. Think about that. So over that whole 27-year period, that adds up to roughly 4,200 recorded tremors just in that zone.
Which works out to, what, a quake every couple of days on average?
Pretty much. The ground is shaking noticeably somewhere in that region almost constantly.
Wow. Okay, so if it's happening that often, why don't we hear about it all the time?
Well, that's the thing. For the most part, they're really small. We're talking magnitudes typically between 2 and 4.
So barely noticeable unless you're right there.
Or unless you have sensitive instruments, yeah. Many might just feel like a faint rumble, something you could easily dismiss as, I don't know, a heavy truck going by.
You really have to be listening, geological speaking.
Precisely. But, even within that constant hum of microactivity, our findings show that every year there are usually 2 or 3 quakes that hit magnitude 4 or higher.
Okay, those you'd feel.
Oh, yeah. Those are definitely strong enough to rattle windows, maybe knock some things off shelves. They're like these little punctuation marks reminding everyone of the immense energy building up down there.
Which brings us to the big question. Why?
Yeah.
Why all this shaking? It really does sound like the Earth is just grinding its teeth under those mountains.
Hey, that's actually not a bad analogy. This constant activity, it's fundamentally driven by this epic ongoing geological clash.
Tectonic plates.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The Indian plate pushing relentlessly northward, diving or subducting beneath the Eurasian plate.
And this is the same process, the same slow motion crash that actually built the Himalayas in the first place, right?
Yeah, precisely. And it didn't just stop once the mountains were up. The Indian plate is still moving, still creeping under Tibet. We've seen estimates around, 5 centimeters per year?
Which sounds tiny, like fingernail growth speed.
It does on our time scale. But geologically, with the immense mass of a continent behind it, that slow, constant push builds up incredible stress in the Earth's crust over millions of years.
And that stress has got to go somewhere. So where's the main release valve? Where's the focal point for all this grinding?
A lot of this stress gets released along a major fault system. It's known as the main central thrust, the MCT.
Okay.
Some people just call it the heart of the Himalayan seismic belt. It's basically the primary boundary where the friction and the pressure are most intense.
And our research zeroed in on specific areas along this belt that are particularly active.
Yeah, definitely. Places like Darchula, Chamoli, Kapkat, Munsiri, Rudraprayag, these are all in India, in Uttarakhand mostly, and then bordering parts of western Nepal too.
So these towns are right on the front line, geologically speaking.
They are. They're situated directly on or very near this primary fault zone, so they experience the brunt of this tectonic pushing and shoving.
Okay, I'm still trying to wrap my head around 200 quakes a year. If that's the reality, why does it feel so hidden? Why isn't it headline news more often?
It's a really good question. Part of it is the size. Like we said, most are small.
Right.
But another big factor is that a huge number of these tremors are actually what we call micro-earthquakes.
Even smaller than magnitude 2.
Oh, yeah. We learned many have magnitudes so low, sometimes less than 0.2, that they just fall below the detection threshold of even standard seismic equipment. So while the records we looked at track quakes down to magnitude 2, there are probably countless smaller rumbles happening constantly that we just don't even register.
It's like geological background noise that the standard mics can't quite pick up.
That's a great way to put it. And depth plays a role too.
Oh, so.
Well, these quakes often have very shallow epicenters, typically only 10 to 20 kilometers deep.
Okay, so close to the surface.
Very close. Which means even if the quake is small overall, the energy is released right near the ground. So locally, the shaking can feel quite sharp and intense.
So if you were right near the epicenter, say in a place like Pithoragar you mentioned, even a small magnitude 2 or 3 could feel pretty jarring.
Absolutely. Intense shaking right underneath you, even if it doesn't travel very far or cause widespread notice.
I see.
And then there are just the practical challenges of monitoring, The Himalayas are vast, remote, rugged.
Yeah.
Getting a dense network of seismographs into places like Munsari or Rudraprayag, enough to catch every single tiny tremor, it's incredibly difficult and expensive.
So there's this picture emerging of constant, subtle background shaking, little reminders, but that's only one part of the story, isn't it?
Unfortunately, yes.
The other, much more unsettling part is the looming threat of something much, much bigger.
Undeniably, that's the major seismic hazard here. While these small quakes are a constant feature, the geology of the region means the Himalayas are also prime for what seismologists call a Great Himalayan Earthquake.
Magnitude 8 or higher.
Potentially, yes. These are the devastating, landscape-altering events.
And sadly, history shows this isn't just theoretical. We've seen them before.
We have. There's a clear historical precedent. If you look back, you see the 1905 Kangra quake, magnitude 7.8, the huge 1934 Bihar Nepal quake, 8.2,
Wow.
the 1950 Assam earthquake, even bigger at 8.4, and then much more recently, many will remember the 2015 Gorkha earthquake in Nepal.
Yeah, that was 7.8, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Caused terrible devastation.
it did. Immense loss of life, huge numbers of people displaced. It was a tragic reminder of the power lurking beneath the range.
And the mechanism for these monster quakes, it's tied to the same plate collision, but it's about how the energy gets released differently.
That's right. It's not always smooth sliding. In many sections along that main central thrust, the immense friction between the Indian and Eurasian plates actually locks them together.
So they get stuck.
They get stuck, but the Indian plate behind it keeps pushing, relentlessly trying to move under Tibet. So these locked segments are accumulating strain year after year, century after century.
Like winding up a giant geological spring.
Exactly. We actually heard it described quite vividly. The idea that the Indian plate slides beneath Tibet but gets hung up by friction for hundreds of years and catches up in minutes.
Wow.
That phrase really captures it. The sudden catastrophic release of centuries of stored up energy when that friction finally gives way. That's your great earthquake.
So this isn't just some remote geological curiosity happening way up in the mountains. This constant activity, and especially the potential for a massive quake. Why does this touch our ground? Why should someone listening, maybe hundreds of kilometers away, care?
Well, because the effects of a major earthquake in the Himalayan arc wouldn't just stay in the mountains, they'd ripple outwards, far outwards.
Affecting huge population centers downstream, so to speak.
Precisely. Big cities like Chandigarh, Dehradun, and crucially Delhi.
Home to, what, over 11 million people?
At least. They are all well within the potential impact zone of a major Himalayan quake, and there's a specific danger for cities built on the vast Indo-Gangetic plains.
Ah, right. The ground itself becomes part of the problem.
Exactly. Those deep, soft alluvial sediments that make up the plains, they can act like jelly. They significantly amplify the shaking from a distant earthquake, much more than solid bedrock would.
So the shaking gets worse further away, in a sense.
In those specific locations, yes. And there's another risk. Liquefaction.
Where the ground turns almost liquid.
During intense, prolonged shaking, yeah. The water-saturated sediment temporarily loses its strength, behaves like a fluid, buildings can tilt or sink, underground pipes can break. It makes everything incredibly unstable.
And we've had recent reminders, haven't we? Even smaller quakes felt far away.
Absolutely. That magnitude 7.1 quake in Tibet back in January 2025,
Yeah.
that was widely felt across Nepal, India, Bhutan, a real wake-up call.
And there was one in Myanmar, Thailand, too.
Yeah, December 2024, magnitude 7.7, another big regional shaker. And even closer to home for many listeners, remember that magnitude 4.0 tremor felt in Delhi in February
I
2025.
do, yeah. It caused a bit of a stir.
It served as a really stark reminder that Delhi itself sits in seismic zone 4.
Which is a high-risk category, right?
It is. It signifies a high potential for significant shaking. So these events, even the smaller ones felt at a distance, they really underscore that this isn't isolated activity. It's all part of a connected regional system.
Okay, so given this constant background hum of activity, the lurking threat of a really big one, and the potential impact reaching so far, what's the main takeaway here for preparedness? What can we actually learn or do with this knowledge?
I think the clearest lesson is that preparedness isn't just a good idea, it's absolutely crucial. Understanding these dynamics isn't about being scared, it's about being empowered to mitigate the impact.
So what does that look like, practically speaking,
Yeah.
on the ground?
Well, it really starts with how we build things. Robust building codes are fundamental.
Making sure new buildings can withstand shaking.
Exactly. Stricter earthquake-resistant construction standards, especially in the most vulnerable areas like Uttarakhand and Delhi NCR. Structures need to be designed to flex and ride out the shaking, not just crumble. We've looked at models like Japan, which deals with constant seismic threats.
They've learned a lot, haven't they?
They really have. Their building codes are incredibly stringent for a reason. It saves lives.
What about warnings? Can we get any advance notice?
That's where early warning systems come in. Investing in systems that can detect the first, faster-moving seismic waves, the P waves, and send out alerts before the slower, more destructive S waves arrive.
Giving people precious seconds.
Seconds, maybe even a minute or more, depending on the distance. Enough time for people to take protective action. Drop, cover, and hold on. Every single moment counts.
And just knowing what to do is key too.
Absolutely. Public awareness is fundamental. Teaching those basic safety actions, running drills in schools and workplaces, having community preparedness plans, knowing evacuation routes. It's not just about technology and buildings, it's about empowering people with knowledge.
Right. And what about the infrastructure we rely on? Roads, bridges.
Critical infrastructure, yeah.
Yes.
Strengthening bridges, dams, roads, hospitals, making sure they can withstand a major quake and remain functional afterwards is vital for emergency response and recovery.
And just keeping the research going.
Definitely. Continued research and monitoring, like the kind that gave us these insights, is absolutely essential. The more we understand the specific behavior of these fault lines, the better we can refine our risk assessments and preparedness strategies.
Now, beyond the direct seismic picture, this constant activity is happening within a larger context, isn't it? The Himalayan landscape itself is incredibly fragile.
It really is. The geological instability, the earthquake risk, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It interacts with other significant environmental pressures the region is facing.
You mean like climate change impacts?
Yes, exactly. We came across some really concerning findings from 2024, indicating that something like 45% of Himalayan springs have dried up over the past 4 decades.
45%. Wow.
Yeah, it's a shocking number, and that adds another layer of vulnerability for communities already living in seismically active areas. Imagine dealing with acute water scarcity on top of potential earthquake damage. It complicates everything.
And human activity itself plays a role too, potentially.
It can, yeah. Large infrastructure projects, things like major hydropower dams, extensive road building, tunneling through the mountains, while often aimed at development, these activities can potentially interact with, and in some cases maybe even destabilize, already active fault zones.
So it adds another layer of complexity to an already very dynamic situation.
It does. It's something that needs careful consideration in planning and development in such a sensitive environment.
So, stepping back, our deep dive into the Himalayas really reveals this mountain range that's far more dynamic, restless, and frankly alive than that majestic, serene image suggests. It's a place of constant, subtle shaking, driven by these immense, unstoppable tectonic forces, and it lives under the very real shadow of a potentially massive transformative event.
It truly highlights these powerful, ongoing geological processes that are shaping our planet, often silently, right beneath our feet. It's this vast drama playing out on a timescale that's hard for us to grasp.
And understanding this, knowing about this constant dynamism, it doesn't feel like it should be about living in fear. It feels more like empowerment, maybe.
I think that's the right way to look at it.
Knowledge allows for better preparation, for smarter decisions about where we build, how we build, and just a heightened awareness of the forces that created and continue to shape this iconic landscape.
It really fosters a respect for the immense power of nature. The same power that built these incredible mountains is still actively transforming them.
It definitely leaves you with a powerful thought, doesn't it? Just contemplating how much hidden energy is constantly building up, stored beneath those seemingly peaceful peaks, just waiting for its moment of release.
Yeah.
And thinking about what that silent geological force really means for the future of the Himalayas themselves, and the millions of lives, the complex ecosystems that exist within its reach.
It's a profound reminder, I think, of the deep fundamental connection between our everyday lives on the surface and the planet's incredibly powerful ongoing internal processes.